ahead. Okay, so when you move from your macro testing, so just throw your arms all the way up, right? And we agree it's this one, okay? Everybody saw that? Like it's that one? Here, if you would be so kind. Sit facing that way. Now throw them up the same way again. You see that better now? Right, this just doesn't go as far back. Okay, come back. Come back over here, please. Thank you so much. You're being very helpful. So now I know it's this shoulder girdle that I'm going to be curious about. So we have to build a model as to how we would then figure out where in the shoulder girdle that the problem was. Generally speaking, we need to check through the soft tissues at that point. So you've got the macro assessment, then you get into the smaller area. So you can say big picture, medium picture, small picture. You can use a lot of different terms for that. But the idea of a large movement identifying smaller problems. So now I know that this is the girdle that has the problem. I need a way to check through this. So if we put forth what we'll call an anterior border or the pectoral tissue, right? Then we call the lateral border of the scapula the lateral border of the scapula because it's the lateral border of the scapula. There's a bunch of tissues. Picking between them is not the easiest to do to figure out exactly which one it is. It is not that easy to do. It just all feels like meat, right? Especially because of where it will be available to you. We're not talking necessarily about checking the actual rotator cuff tissue on the scapula. We're talking about the relationship between the scapula and the arm. So it's as the tissue spans that space. And then we have the medial border. Now in seated, control is always a challenge. So if I wanted to check the medial border, it's not going to be the easiest for you guys to see, but luckily we've got video, right? So what you would end up having to do, actually put your right hand on your left shoulder. Man, I can't speak. So this ends up making it easy, right? Because this more or less wings the scapula. That makes sense to everybody. So even in supine, this actually works quite well because you can wing the scapula so you expose it. Now, all I'm going to need to do is a yield to pressure test. I can't really go perpendicular to soft tissue here. So I would have to control, sorry about the nose, right? That's one of the reasons you're careful when you reach around the front of somebody because you might hit them in the nose, right? And then I would just check through here, right? So I've got to find it, push through it, push through it, push through it, push through it. There, right? And a little bit there, but not much, right? Right? It's just yield to pressure. So I go with a thumb bar up the medial border. That's checking the medial border. It's probably the easiest way to do it in seated. I could control the arm, right? Just let it go. Thank you. Sorry for all the funny noises. And I could do that too, right? So I can push it back to wing it, or I just have her position it to wing it. It just allows it to be exposed. Now the lateral border, I can literally just come in here. So I need the bone to stay still. I need the scapula to stay still. So I'm basically gonna go into the armpit, wrap around the lateral border tissue, and I'm gonna do this, right? Depending on the size of your hand, this may or may not work. Depending on the ticklishness of the patient, this may or may not work. But you just kind of go in here, you can pull it back, and push it forwards. Now pushing it forwards in this angle is not the easiest because you're gonna get a bunch of tension off the skin, right? So it's not the easiest, but you can get some idea, right? So if I was to think on this side or experience what I think it is, right? Pushing forward does feel tighter, but it doesn't actually feel funny to you. It doesn't feel uncomfortable. Is that fair? It's this guy up here that feels a little bit stiffer, right? So my hand is like this. I'm feeling stuff here, I'm feeling stuff along here, and it's the top finger that I feel the most tension on. So broad contact for multi-point discrimination. So you're holding onto a bunch of stuff and you'll figure out where the problem is by doing that. Now, obviously the pectoral tissue, I've got to expose it because I can't, grabbing it here is kind of weird, right? And you're reaching around, it gets odd. So now is where we have to start to kind of get into interesting positions, right? Here. Not easy, very awkward. So some of you figured out better ways to do that. It's just not ideal here. You agree with that, more or less? And the camera can't see it, but I'm getting some nods. Right, we'll have you lay on your side. So if we just keep the simple concept of anterior, lateral, and medial border, right? Now the pectoral tissue is easier to get to, right? Much easier to get to because the arm doesn't have to be in an awkward place. Contact is control, so I've got lots of contact, right? Because if I don't do this, right, then that gets weird, right? But if I do this, I can come in here. Some people like to test it here. The challenge of testing it here is that you build tension into it, right? Because you're lengthening that tissue. You're pulling attachment points away from one another. So you're going to actually have a hard time telling what that tissue is doing. So down there, no problem. Obviously, as you get more up into the tendinous area, it should feel firmer, but you'd agree it's about here-ish, right? That there's something that I might want to work on. Now, to go to the lateral border, again, I need a little bit of space. It's going to be this, okay? So my thumb is going to be a bar, and then my index finger is going to be a bar. And I can pull backwards and push forwards in a relative sense, right? I'm keeping a still bone, moving muscle. I get the arm out of the way to expose it. I can do it this way too, right? This is a little bit more awkward for my hands. Does this feel a little bit more awkward to you?
No.
No? Sweet. Then it's because I'm awesome. No, it's because as you gain the ability to move in certain ways, it doesn't feel that weird. Now, the medial border is going to be tough for you to see, but it's the same idea. If I bring the shoulder blade backwards or the shoulder girdle backwards, it wings, and then I'm just going to do that. That's all I'm going to do is I'm just going to squish into that tissue. There's already something there-ish, and then it just gets worse as we go up, right? And it's the yield to pressure. So I'm literally just like this into the medial border because I want to squish the tissue. But if I do it this way, I can still tell that there's something here, but it feels different to you. Does it feel more wandering? Like just not as obvious?
Yeah, it's not as purposeful. It's a little more pokey without purpose.
Yeah, pokey without purpose. Okay. Now, it could be just because I'm trying to prove a point and I'm being a jerk and not doing it right. But I don't think that that's what I was doing. And you were watching me, so hopefully it didn't look like that. But basically, you're going to, in a relative sense, just pull backwards to give a little space. Then you get it. But the same idea, the medial border, you usually want to wing the scapula a little bit to expose that tissue because otherwise, it's a little bit taut. There's a little bit of tension on it and you can't really get into it. You could, can you flip and face towards me? Now there are definitely people who are going to suggest to you that working in front of the patient is useful. So you can do it, right? What I'm going to have you do is just have the arm there. Okay, so I'll go medial border first. And if you shimmy yourself that way and have the shot there so some of them can see it, right? So you see this? It looks one way, right? Now, if I do this, see how I can get in there and check it? Right? This. Right? It just kind of blocks me there. Whereas if I do that, I can get into it. You see the minor difference? It's tiny, and it may not be visible, but you feel the difference. So you can do that. Some would suggest that this is the way to check the medial border. Okay, no problem, right? A little bit more physically complicated because I have more moving parts now, but you can get it. Now the challenge is if I'm not careful and I'm not looking, look what I can do. I push her really far and I start to think that something's happening that isn't happening because I'm not paying proper attention. The lateral border, not that hard here, right? Much more visible, just a push and pull, right? So everybody agrees it needs to come this way, right? Not too obscure. You can see that the tissue will go that way, has a harder time coming that way. Fair enough. The anterior stuff, right? This is where it's like, what do I do, right? If I'm not careful with this hand facing this way, just because of the size of the hand, you can start to get into sensitive areas that you really don't want to, right? And then, am I checking the pec? No, I'm not checking the pec. I'm moving too much stuff. You know, like it gets awkward. It's possible, but it's awkward. On your back for a moment. There you go. Sweet. So, same idea over and over and over, right? So anterior, much easier here, right? Perpendicular to soft tissue fiber direction. And again, it's up there-ish. You know, same one we had before. The lateral border can look like this, right? So it's this, right? And then that, no big deal, not that hard to do. The medial border is tougher for you to see from here, but it's the same concept. I need to wing that scapula a little bit. Now, for her, the scapula will wing okay. I don't need to worry about it. And usually I just get it with rotating my body like this to rotate her arm and scapula. And now I can check through that tissue, and it's there again. Whee! Camera asked me to do it one more time, and I made funny sound effects. But yeah, there you go. Right now, if that doesn't work, there. Now it's exposed, so it's winging. See, it's the same movement no matter what the position is, right? And then the lateral border is just a push and pull. You can do the lateral border here because you've got it exposed, but when I do this, I'm adding tension into it, into a bunch of the tissue, because I'm pulling attachment points away from one another. So I would want to do it more like that. The elbow should be relatively close to the person's body at that point. Lay in prone for a moment. So clearly in prone, the pectoral tissue is not available to me, right? You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now, checking this, hard, right? So checking cross table is okay here. This is tougher because I'm fingertips and pulling towards. Put your arm up by the side, beside you, yeah. Now that automatically wings it a little bit better, and I can check it easier, right? I'm checking with a bar. Lots of contact just to give me the information that I want, right? And again, it's up there. If I need to, I just do same thing. You see how I just pull it backwards, right? There you go. And I pull backwards to wing it, and I push in. Now the problem here, what do you think the problem mechanically for me here is? If I did this on a lot of people, what's going to be my problem? Is it specifically going to be my low back, or is it going to be the fact that I'm reaching and I'm getting something? So in my case, because my thigh's on the table, I'm not going to put both thighs on the table because then I'm straddling her elbow. But if my thigh's on the table and I reach, my back might be okay, but my hamstring might get messed up because it's a lengthened hamstring that's contracting. So this becomes a bigger challenge. So it's not bad, but it's a challenge mechanically to me, especially over many people. Let the arm by the side. Right now, this actually is probably the most exposed that the lateral border is going to get, right? And everybody can see again, the pushing is harder than the pulling. It's just kind of wrapping around, one hand clapping. So you see, this is the same movement, same concepts, regardless of the patient's position. The details that I have to undertake change. But if I want to check the medial border, I've got to pull the shoulder back, generally speaking, to expose it. The lateral border, I've got to get it exposed, but I wrap around it, whether it's this way or this way. It doesn't matter. I just got to wrap around it, push it, and pull it. Same thing with the pec, right? Now, I'm not going to get the pec here because how am I going to get it? Like, I'm not going to get it. Some would suggest that this is testing the pec. I would say it's testing the movement of the girdle, and if I go far enough, I'm rotating the torso. So it's a mixed test that's going to give you almost nothing that you want it to give you. Yeah, that's the same thing over and over in different positions. And the handholds end up being the same, and the movements end up being the same. I'm in a different position. She's in a different position. That's what is the difference. But it's the same set of movements between her and I, just with different angles and different positions.